was like a calling card.
One of the most iconic images in music.
Looking back on it, it was normal.
Was created by a Utah artist working with the Beatles.
We listened to some music at Paul's house.
See how it all happened and who she intentionally left out.
All I can say is sorry.
The making of the Sgt. Pepper's cover, Wednesday at 9.
Hello and welcome. I'm Jeff with the digital team here at Fox 13, and I am joined by Todd Tanner, who has a piece tonight that I think, I don't even know. I mean, who's not a Beatles fan? But I think that even if you aren't a Beatles fan, you are still kind of like shocked about this story. I mean, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, one of the most iconic albums of all time, with one of the most iconic album covers of all time. And right, you're showing it right there. Here, let's pull it up right here now. And Todd, it was done, maybe not created here locally, but it was done by a woman locally. Talk to us about that.
That's right. So the woman's name is Jan Harworth, and Jan is a Utah resident now and has been since the 90s. But Jan has had quite an interesting course in life. She grew up in California. Her father was a filmmaker, and he was working on a film in Europe. So about the time that she would have been going to college, she went to see him in Europe. She fell in love with London. She applied to an art school in London. She attended, she made friends, she got married, and eventually she and her husband, Peter, were selected by a gallery owner who knew the Beatles very, very well, who said, hey, they're making this album and we're getting some ideas for the cover, and there's this weird mountain picture with gnomes. It's kind of strange. Not loving it, and we were wondering if you would want to take a look at the album cover, take a listen to a few of the songs at Paul McCartney's house, not so bad, and see what you think. So that's how Jan got started.
I mean, that's amazing. I mean, so was she known at all? I mean, was she known?
She was at the very, very beginning of her career, and her husband, they're actually divorced now, but Peter Blake, he's a very well-established pop artist in England now. He is kind of like the Andy Warhol of England almost. He's really, really well known. But at that time, both Jan and her husband were just getting their careers started. In fact, one of the things that you will hear in the story later tonight is that their payment for doing the album cover is they each got £100. And a pound is a little bit more than $1 in today's exchange rate. But that was the grand total of money that they got for an incredible amount of work, because we're talking photos and sculptures, and the image, when it's all put together, is a live set. You've got the Beatles did come in, you see them front and center in those really colorful uniforms, so they were photographed in front of this other set that had been constructed with cutouts and photos and flowers. And here's a little piece of, I think, really cool trivia that Jan filled me in on, and it's actually not going to go in the story tonight, but I'll share that with you right now. When you look at the very center of that image and you see the Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band drum skin, Jan hired a friend of hers to paint that. So that's not just a graphic mock-up like we would do on a computer today. That was actually painted on by hand by a man Jan knew named Joe Fgrave, and Joe was a painter for circus banners of all things. So Joe was hired. He was paid a grand total of $25 to paint both sides of the drum. The drum has two different covers. He was paid a grand total of $25. In 2008, the drum skin, one of the drum skins was auctioned, and I'd have to look up the number, but it was in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. I think $800,000 is what it went for in 2008.
And I obviously we want people to watch tonight at 9 o'clock, the Fox 13 News at 9. But not to give anything away, but I mean, how much say did she have in this, or did she come into it where it was almost a fully formed idea that the Beatles had, and or did she have much say in it?
That's really fascinating. I'm so glad you asked that, Jeff, because She had a lot of say, and so did her husband. The Beatles themselves, very early on, there was a concept meeting. And I think that some of the origin of the idea did come from Paul, but he didn't know where to go with it. He wanted something with more people and the idea of, a crowd of people, and they built from that. But from there, what happened was Jan and her husband Peter, said to the Beatles, okay, well, tell us who your idols are. Tell us who your contemporaries are, and we'll see if we can make an assemblage with those kinds of people. And the Beatles rattled off a few names. Jan says that Ringo contributed, I think, only 2 names. George Harrison just wanted a few Indian spiritualist gurus included. Paul and John had a slightly longer list. However, when it was all said and done, according to Jan, the Beatles had only put forth about a third of the names that they needed. And so from there, Jan and her husband got creative, and they added a whole lot of people, including women, because there were no women recommended by the Beatles at that time. So it's one of those things that I'm sure if that image were being created today, if any band, even a much lesser band, were creating an image, probably more thought would go into it now. But at the time, who we projected as idols and what images we put out there were not as carefully thought about and guarded as they were, particularly in 2020, when you see things in the news every day, like just last week, Jeff, the Bountiful Braves are no longer the Bountiful Braves, or maybe, but at the time, there was a lot of artistic liberty that was given to Jan to add other people into the mural.
So when she was called to do this and she goes there, was it something where, was she already, again, who's not a Beatles fan, but was she a Beatles fan?
No.
Oh, wow.
That's one of the fascinating things, because I sort of expected when I met her that because she had known them and met them and this was her scene and her circle of people that she would be. But she says, no, actually, she was always more so in love with American music and deep roots music and black music, jazz music. And so the Beatles were not her preferred music form. They were nice enough, she says, professional enough, and talented very much so in their own ways, of course, but not her favorite.
That's amazing. So afterwards, though, was she shocked at how famous it became? Yeah, obviously every song is great, but everybody knows the album cover. And
Right.
So
even if you don't know any of the songs, which most of us, especially those of us who are a little bit older, we probably do know the songs, but everybody knows that album cover, or at least the concept. And Jan finds it really, really interesting, and you'll see some of them in the story tonight, that image right there that you're looking at has been more or less duplicated or imitated or outright ripped off by a number of other entities. Sometimes they're rock and roll bands. Pink Floyd did a version. Frank Zappa did a version. The Simpsons cartoon did a version. So there's all these other ideas, and that part Jen is really excited about, because she likes the idea that she was a part of creating this image, which is no longer just this image, but it evolves into all of these other things for other people and other meanings, and gets updated constantly with different figures.
Just one last question. We'll wrap it up and kind of tease it ahead. But did she stay in touch with the Beatles, or was this kind of like one and done and thank you later?
She's no longer really directly in touch with the Beatles. Her ex-husband Peter still enjoys an ongoing relationship with Paul McCartney and a lot of other key players in British music. But Jan is really content to be here in Utah. She's doing murals and work in Utah now. You'll see some of that in the story as well. And she's the one thing I'll say about Jan is she's not smitten by celebrity at all, which is probably a really good tool to have in your belt if you're going to work with somebody as big as the Beatles, because it really helped her kind of keep her head on straight and put all of it in perspective, and it enables her to be able to look back and laugh at some of the things that transpired.
Awesome. Well, that's good stuff. So tonight, 9 p.m., if you're a Beatles fan, if you're not a Beatles fan, if you're a music fan, if you're not a music fan, You know the image. You've seen it. Now learn Utah's connection to one of the most famous albums in the history of music. Todd, you'll have that tonight.
Yep.
9 p.m. Let's look at the promo again. And thanks for everyone for joining us. And hopefully you'll tune in tonight, 9 p.m.
It's like a calling card.
One of the most iconic images in music
Looking back on it, it was normal.
was created by a Utah artist working with the Beatles.
We listened to some music at Paul's house.
See how it all happened and who she intentionally left out.
All I can say is sorry.
The making of the Sgt. Pepper's cover, Wednesday at 9.